This CUB Board of Directors meeting is called to order. Seeing no one in the audience, I will move from public comment session to approval of minutes. Minutes have been dispersed. Do I hear a motion for approval? Motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We see the approval of vouchers. Anybody have any questions about the vouchers? Any comments? Do I hear a motion to approve vouchers?
Motion approved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, monthly reports for December. I will turn it over to Mr. Fay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, both departments continue to do exceptionally well. There, as you can see, the actual year-to-date exceeds in both departments what the forecast was. And Dudley, you might offer some specifics if you like.
I will. For the month of December, electric department made $502,000 net. When you're looking at your year-to-date numbers, you can see that our sales are quite a bit down because the weather has been pretty mild overall for the year. But our power cost is also down. So if your sales are down 1.4 million and your power cost is down 1.47 million, you're really 70,000 ahead right there. And then our expenses have run less than we had anticipated. We're 255,000 less there. You add all that together and you're 328,000 ahead of the forecast through the first 6 months of the year. In the water and sewer department, the water sales are 34,000 ahead. The sewer sales are 25,000 less than we'd forecasted. And you say, well, how can that be? How can your water sales be ahead but your sewer sales behind? Well, that's because the residential sales are up, but the industrial sales, and particularly Ison, is down a lot from what we'd forecasted. And by being down, we lose that sewer revenue. So what we made up in residential sales, then we lost in sewer revenue. But the operating expenses also are 140,000 less than we'd anticipated, and that makes us 155,000 ahead of the forecast in the water and sewer department. And that's all I have unless anybody has specific questions.
Just real quick, the relationship with the sewer sales in the industry, can you just further, I'm trying to think of something I'm going to take back to City Council in my report. Can you further sort of flesh that out for me?
Sure. Not everyone has sewer to begin with. So if you've got the Claxton area, for example, and the water sales are up, but you've got an industry that every gallon they use has sewer attached to it, and they use a lot more gallons than most residentials do, then you've lost those water sales out there, which is also sewer sales. But you've gained everywhere else in water sales, and that made it up. You kind of get the gist.
Yeah.
Plus a residential customer like yourself, for example, you have a maximum sewer bill that you get, and it's based on what you use in the wintertime. So as you go through those hot months, even though you're out there washing the car and all that, it's not generating sewer revenue. But these industries, like Ison in particular, who's had to cut back because of the GM strike, I believe. I don't know that for a fact, but that impacted their water purchase. But that also impacts our water sales or revenue. It's not really a sale.
Mr. Chairman, we have 4,700 sewer customers, and we've got 6,500 water customers. There's almost 2,000 customers difference in that. That makes a difference. Also, I think it's a good time, because I had this for other business, but we're sitting right here looking at this spreadsheet, and we're seeing 244 days of cash on hand, and the statements show $2.8 million in cash. We received from Mr. Greer, who is from the state, who we have had conversations with in the past, in anticipation of this 2-year negative net income, when they changed up the rules, it's automatically, as we told you, a flag at the state. And we sent to him that our latest audit report that indicated 2 straight years, and as a matter of course, that we were set aside to answer questions about that. And of course, we indicated to him that we don't expect any problem. We have 0 debt. We have over $2.8 million in cash. We've got 244 days of cash on hand, and we've got $327,000 in current net income, which is just 6 months into the year. So we appreciate what he needs to do, and the standard. It's all part of the standard procedure, and I think the state does the right thing to keep their thumb on distressed utilities that don't have a rate structure in place that will provide them the capital that they need for maintenance and for projects. And that's essentially why the state did this, because so many got so far in trouble to where they weren't funding their pension or anything else, and their whole system was going down. They want to oversee to make sure, and all this has to do with, do you have a rate structure in place that will fund? Now, we've had that. What got us is the fact that our depreciation was so high. That's a non-cash item, but it does affect net income, and we were flagging below net for 1 year, and then we brought it up the next year, and we were riding teeter-tottering all the time. But as we told you all, two years in a row flags, and that's one of the reasons why we addressed the rate structure, which we did in July. And obviously, we're now rocking at $300 and some thousand, and we don't see that diminishing over time. So I just wanted to let you know and to keep you in the loop, and I'll keep you all up to speed on that. But we feel very good about that.
Anything else, Dudley? That's it. Do I hear a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Project status reports, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're tracking, as you can see, 4 projects. All of these you should be familiar with, and they all are budgeted items. This Dutch Valley Road feeder upgrade, we're very pleased with that. It's really been completed ahead of schedule. This is the largest project that we have in our capital budget for this year. This now, as you know, provides us with improved load transfer capabilities, which is always now part of the filter we're putting into as we do project upgrades. How can this collaterally improve our ability to manually or automatically via FLISR improve our response and the quality of service that we provide? How long are you off, and how often are you off? And this is particularly important in Oliver Springs and Coalfield area because they're served by one source at a TVA. So it's our ability to switch to serve them in a case of event. Aerial cable on Ridge Circle Road, all going, each one of these projects are on time and on schedule. And I'll be glad to drill down on any of those, but if you don't have a question, you've seen these before.
Any questions? Mr. General Manager, proceed.
For the water and sewer, as you see, we're tracking one project, which again, I think you're familiar with, and this deals with the sludge press building at our wastewater treatment plant. The steel is being ordered, and we're meeting with the paint personnel because we determined that this was an opportunity for our crew at the wastewater treatment plant to do some of this painting, and now we're getting the painting specialists in there on the special kind of paint that we need and the process that we need to do that. So as the steel comes in and as time allows, we'll be doing it, and we think we saved about $25,000 by doing that. So that's moving along appropriately also. That's all I have on the project status reports, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions for anybody? Let's move on to the smart grid presentation, part one.
Part one, thank you. Dudley's giving me a new pointer here, so there's a 60% chance that things are not going to go well. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. We're excited about it, and it lends itself to what I consider it's to our advantage to educate and inform, so you all can have not only a better appreciation, you can make informed decisions as we move forward. So I originally was going to do this in one setting, and then I saw that it was going to get away from me, so I now shut the whole thing off.
Hit that button again.
I did.
No.
I can make it go black.
Right, hit the right button.
There you go. Thank you. Which right? The other right. So this is part one. I tried to break it out over 2 months because it's a lot of information, and I'm qualifying this right away. This is a high-level view, and at every aspect there are qualifiers in that. That's not always the case, but I'm really trying to give you the overview, the basic of what we're talking about, so I can drill down on any of these that you like, and I would be happy to do it, but it's not necessary for you to grasp the concept of the points that I'm trying to make. But we can talk more about it. CUB, smart grid. We've demonstrated and are recognized as a progressive, cutting-edge, forward-thinking, preeminent public utility, and that's based on rates, service, and reliability. This is not an opinion. This is backed up by the data, which we have. The virtual power plant is the heart of our smart grid. And I've got to give you some history, so I'm going to talk a little bit slower, and you interrupt me anytime because it's important, like mathematics, you really want to get in on the ground end of this, or by the time we get to division, you won't know what I'm talking about. The key here is 2011. There's a cutoff time, prior to 2011 and after 2011. And prior to 2011, CUB's monthly power bill had no demand or power component to it. And I'll explain that in a minute. All we had to pay for was the energy, kWh, and you're probably familiar with that term, kilowatt hours. So when we got billed from TVA prior to April of 2011, we paid them for all the kilowatt hours we consumed. And that was all we had to worry about. Now, we received a fixed margin on everything that we sold. And that, think of it as a rider on top of what you paid for the power and what you received in revenue. And that margin was somewhere around 20%, around 20%. This type of building was called end-use building because it was based on what you sold to the end user, which is our customers. The combination of all of those meters, whatever we build out, TVA, we would get a margin on that, and we would pay that energy cost. So, Dudley, I am punching this thing like I'm now putting a hole in it.
There you go.
That's great. In 2011, TVA changed the wholesale rate structure. TVA went from an end-use billing to a demand and energy billing. If you look at that little chart to the right where it says energy used, we paid for that whole mountain and everything in between. That was the energy, but we didn't care how high that mountain was. How high the peak was, it didn't affect us at all. The big deal comes because they moved from end-use rate to a demand rate, and they've essentially shifted the cost associated with those peaks or spikes from them to us. So where we were paying for KWH, now we have to pay for KW and KWH, and that's the risk factor associated with that. So I've got energy versus demand and power. It's a concept. Energy is how much, and demand is how fast do you need it. The time element is involved. So I made this chart, and I put, these are 2 electric cars, and I did the speedometers, and I tried to convert it to watts, but I had to have a constant at 10, and then I'm trying to explain how to get a KW. It was too confusing. But it was I spent so much time on it, I didn't want to throw it away. I want you to see it before we go to the next one so you can completely discard it, but I worked hard on that. Now, this is something I think that you can relate to. It was easier for me to relate to it. Power and timing. We got a house burning here, and it takes 500 gallons of water to extinguish the fire. Now you got the garden hose, $8 garden hose over there. It'll put out about 5 gallons, assuming you've got the pressure, it'll put out about 5 gallons a minute. So it's going to take you 100 minutes or about a little over an hour and a half to put that fire out. But it'll give you the 500 gallons. Now this $575,000, and I checked the price on it, $575,000 pumper, this thing will put out 100 gallons a minute. It'll put that fire out in 5 minutes. The energy, we're now going to say are gallons of water, is the same. The hose will put it out, the pumper will put it out. If your house is on fire, you better get the pumper. What's different is how long does it take to put it out. That's the concept that I'm trying to make.
It's a much better concept.
I think it is. Thank you. So before 2011, we got the garden hose. That's all we had to worry about was the 500 gallons. And after 2011, we not only had the 500 gallons, we had to pay for the power associated with that because it's a timing thing. So the demand or power component is measured in KW, which is 1,000 watts. And it's charged for the average of the highest amount used in a clock hour during the month. It's a calendar month and a clock hour. Clock hours, 12 to 1, 1 to 2. Different from a rolling 60 minutes. It's a clock hour. And that's what they look at, 720 plus or minus hours in a month. Whatever the peak time, whatever the peak hour, whatever the most watts that were used in that 60-minute clock hour, that's what they're going to bill us on. Where before, didn't matter when you used it. As long as you used it, that's all you had to pay for. The energy is measured in kWh, and this is for all 1,000 watt hours consumed in the calendar month, and that's what your meters record. Watt hours. So, on peak, the demand charge per kW, 1,000 watts, is $10.35. That's in the fall, the winter, and the spring, and in the summer, they go up to $11.30, almost $1 more. The demand charge on our TVA power bill makes up about 1/3 of our total power cost, and that's a big deal. Now, an example, these little heaters we used to have them, maybe you all still do, 2,000 watt small heater, your hair dryers can now get to 2,000 watts. A 2,000 watt small electric heater used over for an hour is 2 kWh. So it's 2,000 watts for 1 hour divided by 1,000 gets you 1,000 watt hours, 2 kWh. The energy charge for 2 kWh, we charge 9.762 cents per kWh. Not even 10 cents per kWh. So for 2, it costs 19.5 cents. That's what we get That's what we're paid. Now, if that happens in peak, we've got to pay 1,000 watt hours. It's the same 2,000 watts. That's 2 kW. And at $10.35 for 2 kW is $20.70. That's what Cub pays TVA. So $2.70 plus the energy charge, whatever energy, plus the watt charge, whatever we use in energy, plus the demand charge, which is now $2.70. So we're getting 19.5 cents for what you used, and we're paying TVA $20.70 plus another 12 cents for the energy. Not a good deal on anybody's books. It's a big deal. Do you see?
Do we pay that demand charge on all kilowatt hours during the month based on the peak?
On all kilowatt hours used in that hour,
Just in that hour?
in that clock hour. So that's terrible, right? We're losing our shirts. If we didn't have the KWH over the month to make up for that, we would be in a negative. So the demand charge is recalculated every month, and Cub is charged every month for every KW consumed in the highest clock hour of the month. When this came out in 2011, we wanted to do something that will improve our load ratio in order to save on KW, because we had things in place already. Other utilities to this day are not able to do it. KUB can't do it. Oak Ridge can't do it. Nashville can't do it. Memphis can't do it. Today they can't do it. We, in 2011, we wanted to have a program and a plan to achieve a robust demand response by reducing our peak system KW demand. And we got together as a team, all of us, Dudley and Ernie and Todd, all of us got together to determine what is the most efficient and expeditious way to affect DVR. And I can't overstate Ernie Bowles' contribution to this effort. If he gave me an hour with pictures, I couldn't overstate his contribution. But everything is predicated on the criteria. We have a plan before we start the program, because there's money involved in this, there's investment involved in this. And we wanted to make sure that we met ANSI, that we're ANSI compliant, which I'll get into, and that we were transparent to our customers. They didn't see any dips, and it was fully automated, and we had a rapid response. And in that, I'm going to now give you an example of the dynamic voltage regulation, which is one part of the virtual power plant. And next week, we're going to get into the other parts, but I want to give you an example only of how DVR, which is the largest component of our virtual power plant, how that plays in to now what you're already comfortable with, and that's this demand charge of $10.35 per kW. Unregulated peak. Now this you have in your board packet. So this is January the 22nd, last month. It was 19 degrees on the 22nd, Wednesday. We had an unregulated peak coming in at 135 megawatts. 135 megawatts is 135,770 kilowatts.
So an unregulated peak, is that just a spike above? Is it a spike in
No,
consumption?
unregulated is what all the other utilities have to deal with, because they cannot change that spike. They cannot control
But I
that
guess
peak.
I'm still very.
That's
much
why I want to ask the
learning.
questions.
Is the peak caused by consumption?
Exactly.
Okay.
This 7 to 8,
19 degrees, more people are turning on the
7 to
power.
8 a.m., they're waking up and they're turning on their heaters.
Yeah, that's what.
Do you see? In the summer, it's in the afternoon.
Did they, so this particular date, well, go ahead.
Well, no, because what you're understanding now is over the month of January, you've got different days. And each day and each hour of the day, we don't know when the peak is coming. So there's a lot of things that we've got to do to fight the peak. So there's a lot of false starts because we see because we're monitoring it all the time because we can. We see that going up like this. There are things that we put in place and partners that we have that we call on, but we can only call them for so many times during the month and so long of a duration. So it's a little bit of, shall we move now or shall we not move now? That's the guessing game. That's part of the dynamics of knowing when to pull the trigger. So if you can't regulate this, and I'm going to show you where we pulled the trigger here, but between 8 and 9 a.m., that's when we peaked. That's when we peaked for the whole month. So that's what TVA is going to charge us for, 135,770 kW. That's $1.4 million at $10.35 a kW. So what do? Well, we regulate. Now, the blue is where we took in. And I'll show you a better slide, but you can see there at 6 a.m. where it drops down, that's when we saw it coming. And that's when we started inputting what we needed to fight that peak. And then back over here at 9 a.m., you see where we dropped off because we had regulation going during this time. So the difference between the regulated at 135 megawatts and the regulated at 128 and the unregulated at 135 is 7.4 megawatts. That's the difference between those two lines. Now, the unregulated 135, regulated 128, 7.4 megawatts difference is 7,400 kilowatts. And that at $10.35 gives us $76,590. And that 76,000, well, you can see in this chart, you can see where that 6 a.m. to see where the blue dropped all the way down. In between those two right there, that's when we went into full regulation. And it happened that right in the middle of that is when the peak was. So we were most productive in pulling that off. And that saved us $76,590. Now, what you'll see in your board book every month, that red in there, that corresponds to the $76,500 that you see up there, because that's what happens when you regulate. If you're not able to regulate, then it's all the same. You're going to pay the 135 megawatts. You're going to pay for the 135 megawatts. That's why it is critical for us to have the ability to regulate. And that's what separates us from all of our neighbors, is they don't have that ability. They don't have the equipment in place, and they don't have the know-how in place. And we have offered this, and they are not interested because the lights are on, and who cares? Well, it's significant in terms of money to the utility. That's why the power bill is affected, because it's affected by what we're able to do here. So in January of 2020, 76,000. Last month was $75,550. You'll see the chart right there. It pegs this hour. We can't control what hour it is, but when it comes, we have to be ready to fight the peak. So in January alone, for DVR, which is the big dog in the virtual power plant, we saved $76,500. The DPP, which is what we'll talk about next month, is the Man Partnership Program. That was $15,900. And then direct load control, hot water heaters and things like that, which we when we have an event that we're trying to trim peak, then we call on these hot water heaters not to turn on. And that's why, and I think some of you laughed, we turn off the lights because every 1,000 watts is $10.35. We turn on our generators. TVA won't let us generate, but we test them during this time. And then we looked, I want to know, what's it cost to run diesel on the generator? It costs $40 an hour to run the diesel. That's what we have to pay. And we're saving about $1,200 or $1,300 an hour. So it's a good trade-off, you see. But I mean, that's what we go, that's the extent we go through. We're putting regulations on pumps, on the water, but the big motors out there, when we are trying to fight the peak, we put all of these things out there. We've got First Utility. We give them money. When we're on peak, we'll give them money to shut their pumps off. And we can do that. So for January, we saved $98,099 by the virtual power plant that we have. So that's what I got for tonight. And next week, I've got
Next month.
I've got how we align in with ANSI to make sure that the end user, if we're doing this kind of regulation, that it doesn't affect the person at the end of the line. Because the further away you are, the more the voltage drops. So we're constantly checking that as we dial this in order to make sure that our lease customer out there has more than the minimum of what they required, so their TV doesn't start dipping in on them. That was a lot. I know. Questions, because I'm very excited about this.
The red part
Yes.
is based on some sort of algorithm of past history?
No.
Or is it just a guess on what we thought it was going to?
Because we know right away what the impact is that we have in terms of reduction in demand. We know once we start doing it, we know what regulation exactly what the dip is in what it was and where we have to go. So
we really do use historic data to say if we cut this pump off, it's going to save this many kilowatts.
yeah, well, we do a lot of that nameplate too. So we know every time we put a lever in play, how that lever is going to impact the top of that line, because we can't put all the levers in all the time. So we have to be smart as to when we engage, what we do, because we don't know if we have a 19-degree day here, we might have a 4-degree day 2 weeks later, you see. So we have to be able to fight that peak whenever it happens. And that's what we do 24/7. Our people are on that 24/7 to make sure that when that peak goes, we start putting the levers in. And really, what I'll show you next month at the end of the day, because it's not only this virtual power plant that saves us money, although this DVR is probably $5 or $6 million. But at the end of the day, with all of the things that we have, we're now over $9 million. It's $9.6 million since April of 2011. And we can get into those other things, but all I'm trying to show you here is the virtual power plant and the three legs that make that up, and how that impacts us, because it's specific to demand. And that's really what I tried to educate you on today, why we're so concerned about at 2011, when we come into this, now we're going to charge you $10.35 a kW. What are you going to do about it? And we were years in the making of this. We were years in the making to put the infrastructure in place there are utilities that don't even have smart metering. You can't know what the guy at the end of the line's voltage is if you don't have they still have mechanical meters. Now, you can't put them out in an afternoon, you say, and it's millions of dollars of commitment in order to do that. And that's really why people don't want to do it, because it's labor intensive and it's costly. And that's only one piece of it. In order to do all of this, we spent $750,000 in regulators in order to be able to regulate, to have this. And we did a cost study to see how long is it going to take for us to get that investment back. And obviously, it's less than a year before that pays out. And the numbers that I'm giving you, these are net. It's net. You know, when we're hitting $8 and $9 million, that's a net. Yes, sir.
So, if you go back kind of, I mean, obviously it took a while to phase the capital purchases in, right? You know, to put the regulators in as well as build the power plant and so forth, virtual power plant. Do you got an idea, I mean, and I don't have to have it today, I mean, but do you have kind of a ballpark of kind of what the whole thing was, the $5 million that you referenced, that's what it took to kind of get the whole thing up and running? Because clearly it's got the return on it is clearly there, but then you got the second part of it is what's kind of
Good
the ongoing
question.
what's kind of the ongoing capital, you know, or what's the next phase? Is it technology upgrades? Is it, you know, is it computer upgrades? I mean, what's the ongoing kind of equipment replacement or capital expenditure?
Great. We did a business study and a model, because the pieces of this, what we had to have was smart meters. Because without a smart meter, you couldn't make a determination of the quality of service that you're giving every customer. Because the longer the line, the bigger the drop. So if you drop that voltage and 80% of your customers are fine, or 90%, or 95%, we've got to worry about the 5%. So some utilities adjust voltage irrespective of what's happening at the end of the line. And that was part of our commitment from the beginning, that we weren't going to let any customer suffer from our regulation of the voltage. So that was important to us. The only way you could do that was a smart meter, but prior to this, we did the business model for the metering technology to make it pay, because you read those in the office and you do away with your meter readers. So we had a plan to where the payback was, I think, in 6 years. The crossover between the money part of what you saved and what the debt, because we borrowed for that, it was in less than 2 years, if I remember. And we saw the benefits of that quickly. So I'm not putting that money in the cost of this right here, because that is a standalone that paid for itself before we even started this.
Or you have to roll it all together and you get more savings than what's on there.
Oh, no doubt about it.
So yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So the question is, what did it cost us to be able to do this right here? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is $750,000.
Because the regulators.
That's right.
Who makes the day-to-day decisions on when to start cutting things off and back?
We do, and we do have algorithms that we wrote and designed ourselves. But we have a dispatcher back there 24/7. So there's a constant monitor on the virtual power plant, because it's looking everywhere and it's seeing the tide rising. So then you have to determine, well, what time of day is it? Because for something to happen at 3:00 a.m., it's going to have to be something. Where your big peak times are in the winter are early in the morning, on Mondays, on Tuesdays, when the industries come in after a snow day, that kind of thing. Those are the hey, you better be watching what you're doing. And in the evening when everyone gets home, you know, is that a time? The industry can really fool you, you know, with what they do. But that's on a separate piece. That's part of that qualifying piece that because this is residential that you're dealing with here. Got to pull some of that out. So we're looking at these times, known risk times are where we're most specifically watching that. But those are 30 days in the month. And what morning are you going to get hit on, you say? So that's made at the dispatcher's level, the system operator. I shouldn't call them dispatchers anymore. I'm sorry. The system operators, because they're trained for that.
So there's an element of art as opposed to science in this.
Yes, sir.
You've got to have somebody that knows what he's doing
That's right.
and can make the right decision.
That's exactly right. And we've got an artist. Todd has been tremendously good. And again, Ernie is a wizard. He's just a wizard. So we benefited from all that. And instead of just saying, well, our DVR past $6 million, that doesn't penetrate with you all. I mean, I understand that. But hopefully giving you some background and history and the fact that we regulate and our sisters don't. They don't have it in place. They don't have the ability to make that kind of thing happen. And all we're doing is improving on that. Now, I'll show you next month how we're continuing to expand some of these other legs that will continue to add to it, and also give back some of the savings to, like I say, we're at First Utility. I mean, Hardwoods is doing it now. We got some of the schools doing it now. We've all of this is our ability to say, hey, we're now moving towards peak. What we want to do over time is aggregate everybody's ability to shave peak and target TVA's peak, which would be best for the valley, because TVA can spend as much as 20 times what they charge us. They have to spend 20 times that in their peak when they got to go out in the market. Now, that's not all the time, but there are times when they spend as much as 20 times what they charge CUB. So I'm saying if we could aggregate, and I wanted to do that through 7 states Power Board, aggregate our ability to shave peak instead of at a utility level, do it as a system level across the 7 states to shave TVA's peak, which we would benefit from. The only caveat I said, my system can do that, and I don't want to have any less than what I would have if we now concentrate on our peak, because our peak always isn't coincident with their peak. So if we're going to aim at their peak, then I want to make sure that our customers and our investment that we made, that we're not coming up short, as opposed to some utilities that haven't put a nickel into being able to do this, you say. So that's best for public power.
First of all, thank you for doing this and putting in layman's terms so whether we can.
Hose and pumper, how can you beat it?
No, this is great. I understand a lot better now. I was just curious about, when did the vision start? You told us it was, Ernie and Todd and you and Dudley, but I know it was a team effort, but when did the vision
Well,
start?
when in April of 2011, TVA didn't surprise us by saying, here, we're going to go to demand and energy as opposed to end use. So we had a couple of years where we were kicking that around in anticipation. Then what we in anticipation of that, and that's why we were in June of 2012 is when we energized our virtual power plant, and TVA actually tapped into us in order to shave their peak, and they paid us for that. We were sure it wasn't that easy to get it after a while, but I mean, we finally got it. Because of the timing of that, Vicki, TVA sent out a request to the 154 power distributors. We are now trying to see who can demonstrate demand response with voltage regulation. And we've got an award. We've got $7.9 million that we're ready to hand out across the valley for those that can help us find a way to where we can have a regulation response, DR, demand response. Of the 154, only 19 had any interest in or capability to even start to try to address that. Of those 19, it got down to 3. And of those 3, we were first. And because of that, of the 19 that started and the 7.9 million available, we got 3.3 million of that, the lion's share of that. The other one was Chattanooga, EPB, fine utility. In addition to that, they got $112 million with Senator Corker. We're happy for him, for EPB. So where we're designing this ourselves, they're buying this stuff off the shelf as much as they can, you know, and we're dealing with equipment that we had already put in place, but we had to buy the regulators.
But the smart meters came first, that was.
Smart meters came first,
And when
but
did
that's
that-
all, and those decisions were made like building blocks because we wanted to get a plan that made sense, that paid for itself, in anticipation of being prepared to address the new technologies. Today, we don't have smart meters on water meters, although they make them, you know, and you say, well, you wouldn't have to read the meters, and who wants to go down in the water to read it? I mean, the reason we don't is I cannot do a business model that makes sense, that would pay for itself over time. I mean, you got to put batteries in those, but ACWA's got them, you know. They've got them. And you say, wow, man, they're cutting edge. I say, show me a model that makes sense. It's $135 a meter for that. And, you know, show me how that pays off when you're only getting $14 a month in total revenue, and you still have the same number of guys. It's not like we got to add people to read those meters. So all of that, like I say, is all the stepping stones for what we did then. When we get to DPP, Demand Partnership Program, where we say, well, we'll share the wealth in the valley, we're the first ones to do that because we're now trying to improve. And how can we do that? Well, we get partners in, like First Utility District, that can cut these pumps off because they got 3 days reserve in the reservoir. So give me an hour and I'll give you some of that $10.35. You know, we've given back to these people $400 and some thousand, you know, over this time in order for them to participate. So all of these things, to this day, no one's doing DPP, but CUB. And we've got, I mean, it made $15,000 this month. I mean, that's not something to say, wow, but it's 15 grand, you know, that nobody else is doing. It's not like we're not offering it.
Well, I know we all appreciate what you did. I know 2011 was when
The big
something
year.
had to be done, but you all had the vision before then to get things in place, so thank you.
We knew it was coming, and then how can we shave peak? Because that's a whole different deal. How do you shave it and still protect the customer? That's the other part of it. So we're good.
They could get an equivalent system for their 110 million or whatever.
They did. Chattanooga, give me 110 million and I'll give you a system like you've never seen before. I mean, you'll never be
You
able
won't
to
charge me for 15 or 20 years.
No. I mean, that was a grant. I mean, that was so bad. That's when they got into the Flizzer aspect of it, because there are off the shelf, and still, to our knowledge, no other municipal company in the country. As far as I know, there's no other because we wrote this ourselves. We've had Ernie and Todd and everything to go to Texas, go to California, and we're trying to say, because I consider this public power, so it's all part of public power. We could sell this, I believe, but I like the fact that public power means best practices shared, and trying to say, here's how you can affect the quality of service to your customers. I told you about SAIDI and SAFE. There's industry standards for how long are you off and how often are you off. Ours dropped by 65% and 70% when we went to Flizzer, because we're able to get it back on and minimize the duration and minimize the number that are out. So you think, well, that's something that everyone would be interested in. Not so. Not so, because there's an investment to that too. We've got to put out on the phases of the lines, we've got instrumentation so we can find out we've got energy up to here and we don't have it after here. That way we can isolate from here, do you see? And that's why what we're doing, there's 300 is the number that we've said under any one event, no more than 300 is going to be out at one time, because we can isolate where that 300 is. What our goal is over time is to do this, to continue to do this, to continue to bring that number down, to isolate it even further, and how do we do that? We put more equipment out there. And when do we do that? I like contributions, and I put money to that every year in order to put the instrumentation out there, and over time, we'll continue to lower that exposure, And you would think that everybody would say, wow, that's a great thing, because I can show you how we save money, because when you have 5,000 people off in Oliver Springs because the TVA lost power to the whole sub, and we have it back on in 65 seconds, all 5,000, we are now getting KWH out of those 5,000, do you see? And the time that it would take to call, because that was at 4 a.m, to call somebody out and to go out and to send them and get it back on, I can show you over time, all of that's going to pay for the equipment that we do. And ancillary to that is the quality of service that we provide.
Great.
Yep, very good. Thank you. And next month, we will be covering DPP.
DPP, that's right, and DLC, direct load control.
Well,
Right.
wonderful. Any other business? Any other questions before I move on to any other business? Job well done, and I think it is complex,
It is.
and it takes skill to put together a presentation, to educate, because, it's foreign to me.
It's not.
He swung and missed with the buggy and the BMW.
It was that was.
That's
Walk
a
out here
test.
with too big of a head.
It was really good. It was. We don't do our job well enough because we throw terms out and acronyms out all the time, and you hear the acronym, but to understand what that is, it's unless we have things like this, you shouldn't know.
And basically, that would have been costs that would be eventually transferred to the consumer, to the ratepayer, correct? At
We're
some point.
over $1 million a year savings. So if our net income is 1.5 million, it's going to be less than 5. If our net income is 112 million, we're in the red that year.
Yeah, and then at some point, you do enough of that being in the red, you have to raise rates and you have to
That's correct.
pass that cost off to the ratepayer.
That's correct.
So that's a great program, and it's in the best interest of our customers.
No doubt.
Yeah. Any other business, General Manager?
I can tell you that we were recognized by the Arbor Day Foundation. It seems like I say this about every 3 months, but it's a whole year that's gone by. This is the 19th consecutive year. We're Tree Line USA. I put a copy of that email that they sent me in your board book. I also upload to your board book a copy of the letter I mailed to Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, who is a good friend of ours and a good friend of CUB's. And he responded to that. Well, that was good, Dudley. Threw that right up. I wanted to enlist his help in our request for this ARC grant for this I-75 industrial park to get water up that way. Remember last year it got to Tennessee Economic Development and we didn't get it. Well, it'll be in the fall when this thing happens. Now I'm trying to get my ducks better in a row to get his support, and he's committed to share his support for our project with the Department of Economic Development. Next month, March the 10th, we'll again host the Anderson County Leadership Class. This will be the class of 2020. Last year we had over 20 participants. I put on a power presentation highlighting some of CUB's significant accomplishments in our technology, and I'm telling you, they're going to see some of this stuff too, because they were very interested in that. I showed them Flizzer last year with that timing thing. They just loved that. And they also took a tour of our operations. According to Rick, he said it was very popular and everybody really enjoyed it. And later this month, really Friday of next week, I'm heading to Washington. This is an annual thing that I do. It's a legislative rally up there, and it gives me an opportunity to meet with Senator Alexander and Senator Blackburn and also Congressman Flashman and their staffs. We'll meet individually, and I'll be part of the delegation that represents TVA and TVPPA. And while I'm up there, the coincidence to me being up there, my granddaughter lives not far from there. So hopefully I might get a minute to go over and see her. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any questions for General Manager?
Nope.
Any comments, anybody?
I just want to know, did you do that PowerPoint by yourself?
I did.
You did?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm very impressed. I really thought Vicki had helped you with that. Because being an educator and a visual learner, that was very impressive. I mean,
Thank
it
you.
really did, it really did help with the understanding of,
I would be embarrassed to tell you how much time I spent on that, because I did it and redid it and did it like that one slide, because I would start from the beginning again and put myself in your shoes, and I'd say, gosh, that doesn't convey. But visually, you want folks to understand. So, and then making those things pop up, it was Sundays. I didn't hear on Sunday because apparently that phone rings all the time, but it doesn't on the weekends. So I'm glad you like it.
thank you.
Yeah, it was good.
Very good.
Good.
Well, if there's nothing further to come before this board, I will adjourn.